Hey everybody, welcome back to the farm. I appreciate you stopping in. It's a chilly day here in East Tennessee. It's probably the coldest day we've had this year, and it's not really cold yet, but it was around 40 degrees today for the high, about 21 for the low. So definitely got a bit of chill in the air, and I'm sure there's lots of people burning firewood over the last couple nights. But I wanted to go over today just some dimensions and things on the Firewood bundler. I've had several comments and requests here the last just few weeks that have asked me a lot about my bundling machine that I made, and wanted to know if I could give them some more information on it, some measurements, and just a kind of an overview. I did, in case you missed it, I did a video probably 3 months ago, I think, about the build of the homemade bundler. But like I said, it was mainly the build, and I went over some of the parts that I used on it and just some different things, but I didn't really go over a whole lot of measurements. And so I wanted to take advantage of this video here and do that for some folks that have been asking about it, and maybe help some other folks that are in the process of building one or thinking about building one. But let's get to it. We'll go over some measurements and then go over the operation of it. So I think for the most part, basically the top part here is what everyone's been interested in as far as measurements. Just because that's more of where everything kind of happens, and the actual bundling takes place. So what I'm going to do here is just do a measurement from corner to corner, and I made mine just right at 36 inches in the overall depth, and then overall width I'm just a little bit over, we'll call it 40 1/4 is where I'm at there, 40 1/4. So one measurement I've been asked a lot about is the measurement from the outside to the inside of my first runner, which is 14 inches. And then it's the exact same on the other side, 14 inches. And that's one thing you definitely have to be kind of conscious of, is making sure that everything you've got here is in the dead center. You don't want anything to be offset to one side or the other. Make sure the center of your cradle right here is in the center of your framework. And so really the material you use is not so much as important. I'm sorry, y'all, I've got a guest that wants to make a cameo here, and they won't leave me alone. Anyway, back to the bundler. Like I said, the materials you use to make it is not necessarily important. I used an old hammock and cut it up and used some of the parts and pieces off of it to make mine. I would suggest using square or rectangular tubing for the top, just because it's a better mounting surface for everything and it keeps everything good and square. So that's something I definitely would recommend. I used, I think this is 2x3 that I picked up at the scrap yard, and then everything else on this main part of the frame mainly came from the hammock, except for these 1-inch square tubing, and I think this 1-inch square tubing, which I had left over from an old project. But like I said, the base and the uprights, you can basically make those out of anything. And the height is that's a lot of your preference as well. The height of mine, I'm right at 34 inches, 34 1/4. But like I said, you can make the height whatever your preference is. If you're a little shorter, make it shorter. If you're a little taller, make it taller. I'm right at 6 feet, 6'1", and that 34 1/2 inches is a good, comfortable working height for me. But like I said, that's strictly based on your preference there on how high you want to make it. Another important measurement area would be the actual, the bundling area where you put your wood. And I made mine, of course, to where I could put a 16-inch long piece of firewood in there, butt it up against the plate, and just barely let it rest on this 1-inch piece of square tubing. And then the width of it, I just did basically a 1 foot by 1 foot square that I could use for that. And that way, if I did want to do a 1 cubic foot bundle, I could. I have only done 0.75 cubic feet bundles, and so I made a mark here at 9 inches that gives me that 0.75 cubic foot bundle. I left it tall enough here to where if I did want to do a 1 cubic foot, I could. Now, as far as the business end of it here, this plate here that I used for my arm it's a 1/4-inch plate. It's 4 inches wide, and the overall length is 30 inches. And I came up with that number really just based on I wanted to give myself plenty of room for my wrap here on either side of my bundles, to where, more or less I cleared my bundle all the way around. So that's how I determined this measurement on that plate. And then from there, I just used a 1-inch piece of cold rolled steel. I think this one's, I bought maybe a 1 foot long stick. My distance right there is about 9 1/4 is what I ended up being. And I just took that round stock there, and I welded this 3/4 inch shaft collar right here. I welded it to the back of my plate, and then basically the whole plate slips onto that shaft. And then from there, I sandwiched some 1-inch flange bearings kind of together there. You can kind of see how all that's made up together. I put the flange bearing, my plate, and then I welded another 3/4 inch shaft collar. I don't think you can see it very well, but I put that between the shaft collar and the sprocket, and I welded it to that sprocket. And then I bolted another shaft collar to that. So really everything that you see there that's moving, let's get you a little bit closer there. Everything you see there that moves is all connected, and it's sitting basically on that 1-inch shaft, and then it's just spinning on the bearings. So right here is the side of my bearing, and here's the other side of the bearing with the set screws. So all of that complete mechanism entirely spins on those two bearings. And for my crank, I used a 3/4 inch piece of cold rolled steel shaft with some 3/4 inch pillow block bearings, and I coupled that up to I think it's a 15 tooth sprocket, and put this number 40 roller chain on there. Used the pillow block bearings to more or less slide out my tension and get what I wanted on it. Welded this old jack handle that I had and made my turn crank. For my counterbalance, I had a piece of lead that I've had laying around the garage for years. I'm going to guess that this is about a 10-pound chunk, roughly. Just kind of by how you know, picking it up and grabbing it there when I put it on, I'm going to say around 10 pounds. It may be just a little bit heavy. You could probably get away with 8 pounds of weight. And the reason I say that is, you know, when your roll of stretch wrap is full, you can see it goes to the bottom. And then, you know, it's basically going to keep that down there out of your way. But the more shrink wrap comes off the tube, like right here, I've got a tube that I've almost used up. But once it gets down, you know, halfway or better, what ends up happening is my weight is more than my tube. And so my shrink wrap ends up here instead of, you know, more level or weighted down. So I think that may be just a little bit heavy. Like I said, that's something you may have to experiment with. It works good, like I said, especially with a full roll on there. I mean, it just about basically wraps itself. I mean, it's very well balanced. And when it stops and ends, it's always at the bottom. So one thing I would do differently on mine, and the reason it ended up the way it ended up, is because this 1-inch piece of threaded rod that I had, that I've welded here, that I made all this part with, was a certain length, and it worked out basically perfect inside my distance of my bundler. But what I wish I could have done was space this differently and put this spring out here on the front, like most of your other machines. So take that in consideration. I think if I can get this spring out here, it would help me out a little bit as far as my tension goes. But that's really the only thing that I would have tried to do differently, is get that spring up here. Let's do a bundle real quick. There's what my finished product looks like. Good tight bundles. I usually do 3 to 4 wraps, and then I'll put my paper in, and then usually 2 to 3 more wraps on top of my paper. So I think altogether, for a cost, I probably have, now granted, like I said, you know, most everything on this is pieces and parts that I had laying around or picked up at the scrap yard for pennies on the dollar. The only things that I've really purchased, you know, were the chain, the bearings, the sprockets, and the actual shrink wrap itself. Everything else, for the most part, I had laying around the house. So all in total with this, I may have, I don't know, I'm gonna guesstimate here, but I'm gonna say probably $80. So that's not bad. And that, like I said, that $80, you know, 50 of that is going towards the shrink wrap. All right, I think that's going to wrap up this video. I hope that it's been helpful, especially to those that have been asking questions in the comment section on the build. And if you got any more questions, feel free to ask. I have ran about 275 to 280 bundles through the machine so far. And as far as the stretch wrap and how far it goes, this one here is the second roll that I've used, and you can probably see on there I've still got quite a bit left on that roll. I just wanted to go ahead and put a full one on there for this video, but I'll go back and use this up. This is my second roll, and so, you know, and I feel like I probably wrap my bundles a little bit more than most, but to me that's a pretty good amount of bundles for the roll. I mean, even if we just stopped where we're at and moved on, you know, we're 135 bundles to a roll, and I got that 4-pack of rolls for just under $50. So that's you know, that's pretty good as far as what you can get out of them. I mean, I don't see any reason in the world why you couldn't get 800 to 1,000 bundles out of those 4 rolls, and that's $50. So that's a pretty good amount of bundles for not a lot of product used. And as we all know, less overhead means more profit. All right, I think that's going to be it for this video. I hope it's been helpful to someone, especially if you're looking to build one of these bundling machines to start your little side gig. If you're thinking about it, just jump in and do it. You're not gonna mess much up if you do. And you know, if you mess something up, cut it off, re-weld it, try it again. So I appreciate it, guys. I hope to catch you on the next one. See ya.